Hello, and welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for all your bookish needs. My name is Chris, and I am coming to you from the wonderful state of Indiana in the USA, and I am joined by Jenny.
Hello.
Coming to you from Norwich in the UK. And today we are going to be doing something pretty fun, which is looking into the future of all the great, wonderful books that we are looking forward to coming out in 2023. And I am not somebody that reads a ton of new releases. I typically read a lot of backlist, but I have to say there are some absolute bangers coming out in 2023, and I've had a blast looking through all the catalogs and most anticipated lists and stuff like that. But before we do that, we're going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been reading. So, Jenny, what have you been reading?
Well, I'm currently reading 2 fantasy books, Chris. Would you believe it?
Oh my days. I feel like I've been an influence.
Yes. Now, I don't know what the different terminology is for fantasy books. I feel like they're not... What's high fantasy?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's all sorts of different definitions, and people subcategorize based off of a whole bunch of different things. I would say high fantasy for me typically means it's set in a secondary world, and it includes a decent amount of magic. That would be my idea for high fantasy, where I feel like epic fantasy can be high fantasy, but it just means more to me that it's a really grand scope, a lot of different characters, etc., etc. That for me is how I kind of differentiate between the two.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure from that I can still categorize either of these. I don't think they're epic fantasy, but maybe they are high fantasy.
Okay.
So I am currently reading Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, which is everywhere on... I mean, me and Chris both watch a lot of BookTube. I feel like I'm going to talk about books that everybody's already heard of and seen everywhere.
I can tell you I haven't heard of it.
Haven't you? It's got that bright pink cover.
I am looking at the cover now, and I have seen it, but I don't know anything about it.
So, this is, I believe, it's Juno Dawson's first adult novel, because I'm pretty sure she's definitely a YA writer, so I don't think she's written adult fiction before. And Her Majesty's Royal Coven is... and I hadn't realised, this will mean nothing to you, Chris, I'm sure. I hadn't appreciated that Her Majesty's Royal Coven is obviously HMRC, which in the UK is the government department for taxes and stuff. So I already quite liked that. I thought that was very good, very funny. But it's essentially, it's what it says it is, and it's about this group of witches who you're with at the start of the book. It's 25 years prior to the present day. So you're with them as children. They're about to take some oath to presumably become, official witches. And then you jump 25 years on into the future, and one of them is the head of HMRC, which is not the tax department. And she's the high priestess. And there's a dark, evil presence re-emerging, and the oracles and stuff have predicted that there's going to be a huge war, and the book has started where she's trying to get her kind of former witch friends all back together, because they vary in the powers that they have, and some of them have obviously been previous members of HMRC, and she's calling them back because of the powers that they have. And I'm only a quarter of the way through, and I don't think it's spoilers to say that they've basically encountered a male witch, a young male witch that has very powerful magical abilities that they can't control yet, which I feel is quite a staple plot line from maybe quite a lot of fantasy. But so far it's really good fun, and that's what I've heard a lot of people say about it, is that it's just a lot of fun and a good old romp through witchy territory.
Does it aim to be like pretty comedic?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I was just kind of curious, given the whole play on HMRC, if that was...
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's not supposed to be a funny book.
Okay.
I guess that's just quite tongue-in-cheek, really. But yeah, no, it's good fun so far, and I'm really wanting to pick it up, which is a nice feeling to have.
I guess I had kind of, I don't want to say written it off, but hadn't paid any much attention to it because I had seen it floating around. But I knew that Juno Dawson was a YA writer, and I don't like YA, so I just kind of ignored it, thinking it was just probably YA, but it sounds pretty fun.
I'll feed back on that because I'm not a YA fan. And I'm wondering what makes it not YA. Presumably some of the tropes are not that are in YA won't be in there, which are the ones that annoy me, like the romances in YA really piss me off. So it'll be interesting to see what makes this an adult novel.
Any more with science fiction and fantasy, and this is maybe going to sound like mean, and I don't mean it to be, but I do think it's getting harder and harder to differentiate between YA and adult fantasy because so much of the adult fantasy coming out now is written in I don't know, I feel like there's no way to express this depending without sounding mean, a much more simplistic style that could be read as YA. And I personally find that a little bit frustrating, but I do think it's definitely blurred the lines, I think, more than they used to be.
Currently, unless the themes change significantly, you could easily give this to a teenager to read, is my current vibe. But yeah, Juno Dawson's a YA writer, so it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this got categorised as adult.
Didn't she have a memoir at some point, too?
Yeah, I think she's brought a few memoirs out. I've read her memoir, actually. The Gender Games. That's very, very good.
That's right.
Yeah, no, and I did really enjoy it. And she is very funny in that. So, yeah, that's a very good audiobook if you want to listen to it. But the other book I am currently reading, which also I've seen lots of people talk about in, like, the fantasy realm of BookTube, is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Now, this is about an orc who doesn't want to be orc-like anymore and has retired from her warring ways and is opening up a coffee shop. And presumably the opening of this coffee shop is not going to be as straightforward as she was hoping, and her retirement from the warring faction of orcdom is not going to go smoothly. But yeah, I've just heard that this is a really cozy read, and that's what I want at the moment. So I'm listening to that on audio, which is narrated by the author, but he is very, very good, actually.
Oh, interesting. This is one of those books where I have nothing against it. Like, I know that people are loving it. I know that it's bringing joy to a ton of people. It's kind of a breakout success for the author because I think it was originally self-published and then Tor picked it up. It sounds, for me personally, way too charming and cozy, and I feel like I would hate it. So I've not been drawn to it. But I know that for people who really like it, they've really been enjoying it. So it's definitely found a fan base.
Yeah, it just sounds right up my street. Opening up some cozy little coffee shop somewhere where they don't know what coffee is. Yeah, it's cute. Whether how cutesy it turns out to be will be interesting.
The existence of coffee in fantasy books always takes me aback because so many of them are written to feel like medieval England that, like, I don't know, every time coffee is brought up, I'm like, oh, coffee in fantasy.
Well, this is actually, because, like, she's bought an old, is it livery? Is that where they keep horses? I don't know. But yeah, it's sounding oldie worldy. So. Yeah, they're talking about coffee machines.
It definitely sounds like it's charming, and you have to report back on how you find it. I've heard from some people that the stakes are surprisingly high, given the kind of given the kind of vibe and theme and setting, that it does have its moments. So you'll have to report back on what you end up thinking.
So what about you, Chris?
Well, I have read 2 absolute bangers to start the year off.
Hey.
I'm so excited. The first book I read was John Darniell's Devil House, which I was really resistant to kind of reading John Darniell because he's, kind of a celebrity. I don't know why I said kind of, like, to diminish his celebrity status. He's a celebrity. He's the lead singer or lead of the Mountain Goats, which is some sort of indie rock group. And so when he started kind of getting literary buzz a few years back for Wolf and White Van, I kind of ignored it, just kind of assuming that all the buzz was coming from his celebrity status. But Devil House, the cover, the premise really drew me, and I decided to read it. And I'm really glad that I did, because I think it's a really interesting book. So it's kind of a take on the true crime book, but it's very experimental in its structure and quite a literary book. So it opens up following the perspective of a man named Gage Chandler, who in the 80s and 90s had written some true crime books, his most famous of which was called The White Witch of Morro Bay, in which he looked back at this old case where this woman had killed 2 of her students in self-defense, but the jury didn't buy her self-defense argument, and she was ultimately executed for the crimes. And so he wrote a true crime book kind of reopening the case and showing that she really did, act in self-defense. So that's one kind of thread in the book. But the main thread in the book is that his editor has tasked him with purchasing this house in Southern California where a pair of grisly murders happened that had been dubbed Devil House, that was kind of linked to Satanism and all this different stuff. And the house used to be a pornography shop at the time when the murders took place. And no killer was ever found for it. And his editor wants him to go live in the house for a couple of years, investigate, and then write a book on it. So the book opens up with him kind of arriving, purchasing the property, and all this different stuff. But then it just takes all these different, kind of digressions, because the book is structured so that the 1st and 7th part of the book is about Gage kind of investigating Devil House. The 2nd and 6th parts of the book are about the White Witch of Morro Bay and what happened with her. The 3rd and 5th portions of the book are about what actually happened inside Devil House. And then the 4th section of the book is something completely separate. So it almost has this structure that feels like concentric circles or something. And it's a really interesting look at true crime as a genre, because it's populated by all these characters who are willing to go to extremely violent lengths to protect the spaces that they feel personal and holy to them. While at the same time, Gage, as kind of this investigator looking in on these people, feels like an intruder in the same way that these people have been fighting off intruders. It's very layered and very interesting. I do think that at times it's a little overambitious. There's digressions that it makes that I don't think are totally successful. Towards the end of the book, one of the mothers of the victims of the White Witch of Morro Bay ends up writing Gage Chandler a letter. And I really was not a huge fan of that, because it definitely had the kind of subtlety in dealing with the theme of like a 2x4 to the face. But I don't know. This book really got under my skin. It's really, it's really interesting. The way it's written has this kind of faux true crime voice to it. There's times when you kind of had to remind yourself that this wasn't real true crime story. Yeah, just really fascinating. I mean, I don't think it's going to provide the kind of like traditional thrills and chills of like a horror or true crime, despite the cover of it, but really, really liked it. Have you heard anything about this one?
Yeah, I've seen this one doing the rounds on like horror booktube.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's on my TBR. But yeah, it sounds interesting. Looking at the reviews, people are like, it's either 5 stars or it's 2 stars, and people are saying it's complex and confusing. So yeah, it's not what I expected it to be about from your description.
No, I think the cover of it really makes people think it's going to be a much more traditional horror or thriller story. So I think it does set up kind of
got a house in the
false
front,
expectation. Yeah, it has the house in the front, and then silhouetted underneath the house is like a snarling devil that looks like the house's silhouette. So it definitely has like a really traditional horror book cover for a book that is not a horror novel, is really more of a true crime, but really is more of a brutal excoriation of the true crime genre. So I absolutely loved it. And then the other book, which I've read and absolutely loved and think is fantastic, it might be in my top 10 new favorite books of all time, is The North Water by Ian Maguire. Have you read this one?
I haven't read it, and I get confused because it's a TV series that I definitely want to watch.
Yes, it is. It was actually nominated for the Booker Prize back in like 2015 or 2016. And at the time that it was nominated for the Booker Prize, the fact that it was nominated for the Booker actually made me less excited about it, because I thought that it was going to be a bit dry, maybe have this really exciting premise, but actually kind of deliver it in a way that was a bit more reserved or something. It is not. It is explosive, a plot that just absolutely rips, and really fantastic writing. So the book opens up and you're introduced to this absolute monstrous character named Hendrix, who, and I will say, trigger warning for just basically anything you can imagine in this book. It is one of the most grisly, dark books I've ever read. And you open up following the perspective of Hendrix, who is set to go aboard a whaling ship. And the day before he goes aboard this whaling ship, he murders some guy in a tavern, and then rapes and murders a young boy. And you get all of that within the first 10, 20 pages of the book. And then the rest of the book is really following the perspective of this man named Joseph Sumner, who has kind of a murky past. He claims that he's about to inherit all this land in Ireland, but that the case is being held up, his inheritance. And so while the courts and his solicitors are taking care of that, he's going to go aboard this whaling ship that's heading to the North Waters to be the ship's surgeon. And he has a military background of being a surgeon. But you get pretty early on hints that really the way he has presented himself is maybe not the truth. And now he's aboard the same ship as Hendrix, this kind of monstrous character we were introduced to at the very beginning of the book. And it's kind of a cat and mouse game, because pretty soon one of the cabin boys ends up dead and raped. Obviously, the reader knows that Henry is responsible for this. And you watch as things get really tense on this ship, as the ship starts to experience more and more problems on this whaling expedition, and as the environment becomes much more unforgiving. And it is a brutal look into evil and darkness and what makes something evil, the compromises that people make with evil, what happens when people compromise with evil, all with this exciting, high-stakes mystery adventure plotline. It's brutal and wonderful and beautifully written, and I think if you can stomach the premise and what I've described, I think it's one of the most rewarding reads you can have.
Surely the horrible character has got to be Colin Farrell.
Yes,
that's who's in the TV series.
Yes,
it is. Gotta be
I
him.
believe so. Yeah. It's so freaking good. It is a really, really good book. I was really surprised by how good the writing was, how exciting the plot was, all the little discussions it was having. It's a really interesting one.
Yeah, I'd like to read it. Sounds really good. Yeah, the TV series is on my watch list on the app I used.
Yeah.
A bit like Goodreads. But I think I did know it was a book. Maybe I hadn't put two and two together, because I definitely have heard of the book, and I've looked up the cover and recognise it. So I think I just hadn't put two and two together that they were the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds really good. Top favourite, top 10.
Yeah, it really blew me away. I mean, it's been a while since I had a book where I was just I didn't want to do anything but read that book. I didn't want to play video games or watch any television. I didn't want to watch BookTube. I literally just wanted to sit on my couch and stare at the page, which, as COVID has ruined my attention span, any book that can do that to me right now is really high on the list.
This is where we take a little break to tell you about all the different ways you can support the podcast, some of which are totally free. A really effective and easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There is a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcast page where you can write a review. And if you listen on Spotify, you can now very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We're at Bookcast Club on both Instagram and Twitter. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter where we share even more book recommendations and all the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family about us. If you want to support the podcast financially, we do have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month. We offer early access to the podcast, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalised book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. We will also send you books in the post. There are over 20 bonus episodes you can get instant access to if you sign up as a patron today. The link is in our show notes. But however you choose to show your support, we, as always, want to say a huge thank you. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
Shall we discuss our anticipated releases?
Let's do it.
I'm really excited. I feel like there's so many good books coming out in 2023.
Do you usually do this, Chris? Like go through
Yes.
what's coming out?
Yeah. Every single year, I go through all the publishers' catalogs, which I have to go on a little mini rant right now. Publishers. If any publisher is listening to this podcast, which if you're not, you really should be listening to this podcast, you guys have got to start making the publishers' catalogs more readily available on your websites. It should not be like trying to contact the freaking president of the United States to find out what books you have coming out in the next season. Holy shit. Okay? And Macmillan used to be really good about it. You could find all their catalogs, like, uploaded, all their little imprints, all perfectly there. They just gave up and quit uploading those. And so anyway, I would like them to stop doing that. It makes it very difficult to do the research that I like to do. But I go through, every year I go through all the publishers' catalogs, the ones I can find, and all the upcomings. And I get really excited when places like The Millions, which is one of my favorite kind of literary websites, they put together the great most anticipated first half and second half lists of the year. So all the big releases coming out through June. And so I love doing it, even though I'm somebody who doesn't read that many new releases. I just love sifting through and seeing if there's any that I really want to get into.
Yeah, I do end up reading a lot of new releases, but I think that's mainly because I get influenced as the year goes on from all the kind of book content that I consume. But I do enjoy looking ahead. Like you have said, the traditional ways of doing it, which would be to go on the publishers' websites and find the catalogues, isn't that great anymore.
No, they used to be, I'm not tripping. They did used to be much more easier.
Or they don't upload them in time or something. Yeah. You tend not to be able to find the new ones.
You used to be able to just find the catalog on the publisher's website, bingo, bango, bongo, right there.
Yeah.
And now it's I don't know, pulling teeth.
But I don't know how else people find them. It's not I think there's another method of doing it.
I mean, I guess you can. Some of them, they allow you to look at their entire books, everything they publish, and then sort the books by date, and then you can find the upcoming ones. But that's oftentimes harder because it's not separated out by imprint. And so I don't know, I'm on HarperCollins, but I'm not interested in any of their romance titles, but I have to sift through all this different stuff to try and find what's coming out. So it's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, so my method these days is to actually go to NetGalley and kind of see which ones have been put out for review, basically.
I have burned my bridge with NetGalley, I think, because I've requested 2 books from them over my career as a book reviewer, and not reviewed either of them, and so I have a 0% rating.
0%.
Yeah, so it's almost impossible for me to get books from them, and I've given up trying. So yeah,
I'm only on about 50, so mine's not great, but it's okay. So my books in the first half of this year, that's the other thing I tend to find, is that you can find the first half of the year, and then it gets harder to find like what's coming out in the second half of the year.
Yep.
So I don't know, do we want to do this in chronological order? Are we that clever?
I have not arranged mine in chronological order.
Let's
so
not do that then. I can do one that actually, oh god, 2 of mine have already come out. This is the thing. So I had a book that I had pre-ordered and forgotten that I'd pre-ordered arrive this week, and it came out on the 12th? Yeah, the 12th of January, and that is Kirsty Logan's new book, which is called Now She Is Witch. And I really love Kirsty Logan. I have read, I don't know how many short story collections she's had out, but I've read 2 of them. I can't remember the name of the first one. That's terrible. But I've read The Things We Say in the Dark, which is a short story collection. And I have read The Gloaming, which is one of her novels. I own The Grace Keepers, but I haven't read that one. And this is her new novel. And I just love everything witchy. So as soon as I saw the title, I was like, pre-order. So some of what they say about witches is true. She dug her mother's grave in the poison garden so it would stay hidden. Lux has lost everything when Elsie finds her alone in the woods. Her family, her lover, her home, all burned. The world is suspicious of women like her, neither maiden nor mother, but Lux is cunning. She knows how to exploit people's expectations, how to blend into the background, and she knows a lot about poisons. Elsie has not found Lux by accident. She needs her help to seek revenge against the man who wronged her, and together they pursue him north. But on their hunt they will uncover dark secrets that entangle them with dangerous adversaries. From the snowy winter woods to the bright midnight sun, from the horrors of plague to the relief of healing, from lost and powerless to finding your path, Now She Is Witch questions the oppositions that shadow our lives. In rich and immersive prose, Kirsty Logan conjures a world of violence and beauty in which women grasp at power through witchcraft and poisons, through sexuality and childbearing, through performance and pretense, and most of all through throwing other women to the wolves. This is a witch story unlike any other.
Oh, fucking hell, that sounds good.
It sounds really good. I mean, it kind of sounds like the complete opposite to Her Majesty's Royal Coven I'm currently reading. And I do feel like if anyone's going to turn kind of the usual tropes of witches and witchcraft on their head, then it'll be Kirsty Logan. If people haven't read any Kirsty Logan, she kind of writes quite dark fantasy. Her books are kind of steeped in magical realism, really. So I really like her stuff, but her stuff won't be for everybody.
I have never actually read her because
I do love her stuff.
I know, I do too. I don't think anything she has written has been published in the US.
Oh, not this again.
I know. She's one of those authors that's like really big in the UK. Like people love her in the UK, and she just has not really gotten broken out here.
That's rubbish.
I know.
When you come over, you're going to have to go back with like a load of books.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could just get it on Book Depository, but I try my best to, like, kind of not use Book Depository too much because it's Amazon. But, yeah, that might be one I break the rules for because I really do want to read Kirsty Logan, and that sounds really good.
Yeah, I think you'd really enjoy her.
Well, my first book is Birnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. This is absolutely probably my most anticipated book of the year. So Eleanor Catton is, of course, the author of The Luminaries, which won the Man Booker Prize back in, I think, 2013. And I believe that made her only the second New Zealand author to ever win the Booker Prize, and I believe the youngest author to have ever won the Booker Prize. And I love The Luminaries. It's one of those books that I found to be unputdownable, and I'm always upset when I hear people say that they're intimidated by it, even though I understand where they're coming from, because it's a big behemoth book. It's written in a neo-Victorian style, so all those things sound like it's going to be really hard. But it's not. It's completely gripping, and if you like things like Hilary Mantel or Sarah Waters, you would just completely love it. This one sounds very different. So Birnham Wood is kind of a psychological thriller. So Birnham Wood is actually the name of what I guess it's called a guerrilla gardening group. So it sounds like kind of a group of radical environmentalists. And they have set their sights on this abandoned town that they kind of want to take over and work and garden in, I guess. I don't quite understand how that premise works out, but what I do know is that they come into conflict with a billionaire from America who is looking to purchase the town, but he is happy to have them, come onto the land and work the land and produce on the land for him. And it's about the tension between this group of, maybe sort of eco-terrorists and this billionaire, and whether or not they can trust each other going forward. And I don't really know exactly where the story is going to go from there, but it sounds like a really interesting idea, and I'm just really excited to see what Eleanor Catton does next, because The Luminaries was only her second novel, and she hasn't written anything since then. It's been 10 years, so I'm just really excited to see what's next.
I was going to ask if she'd written anything since, so... Yeah, no, 10 years is a long time.
It really is. It really is. And yeah, it's making me want to go back and reread The Luminaries, kind of just in preparation for it. But it is a really big book, so I might hold off. But
I know, that's why I haven't read it.
It's really good. I know
It's big.
it is. It's big. It's an investment. But it's so good. It's really good.
So my next one is, and again, this came out this week. This is coincidence that the two of the three books I'm going to talk about have already come out. Does mean you could go buy them now though, so I mean that's exciting. And this one came out on the 17th, I think, so a couple of days ago, and that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Now, I have read two books by Grady Hendrix. I have read the Southern... now then, what's it called?
Is it the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying? Yeah.
I always get it wrong. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. That's
okay.
Right. That does not trip off the tongue.
No, it doesn't.
And I loved that book. Like, it's super camp. It's great fun. And then I read... the Final Girl Support Group. So I was expecting the same sort of thing, like just a really fun time. And that one wasn't so much. It was kind of quite bog standard, plot heavy, trying to be suspenseful, but not particularly. Like, it completely lost the fun element that I'd enjoyed so much about the book club one. And because while I was reading the Slaying Vampires book club, I immediately went out and bought two of his other books, which I haven't read, Horror Store and My Best Friend's Exorcism. So I've got those, and I should read those first before I move on to his new one. But they just sound fun, and the covers look fun. And I think I decided that that's the sort of horror that you write. It's like fun, campy horror. But now I'm not so sure, because I've read two and it was like 50-50. So his new one is called How to Sell a Haunted House. When Louise finds out her parents have died, she dreads going home. She doesn't want to leave her daughter with her ex and fly to Charleston. She doesn't want to deal with her family home, stuffed to the rafters with the remnants of her father's academic career and her mother's lifelong obsession with puppets and dolls. She doesn't want to learn how to live without the two people who knew and loved her best in the world. Mostly, she doesn't want to deal with her brother Mark, who never left their hometown, gets fired from one job after another and resents his success. But she'll need his help to get the house ready for sale, because it'll take more than some new paint on the walls and clearing out a lifetime of memories to get this place on the market. Some houses don't want to be sold, and their home has other plans for both of them. So, I mean, that sounds fun. And dolls and puppets are just terrifying. So it'll either be super fun or be super scary, is what I've decided. And knowing me, I won't read the two Grady Hendrix that I own that I haven't read. I will probably just go straight for the new one. But yeah, we'll see. I reckon after a third of his books, surely I'll be able to decide whether he's like a favourite. I feel like he should be a favourite author of mine.
I love his book covers. Like, literally every book cover is so good. I loved the My Best Friend's Exorcism one that looks like you're renting a video.
Like VHS tape.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, maybe one day I'll read these. I feel like I kind of do want to get into horror, like, this year. That is, like, kind of one of my goals. But I feel like this is not the entry route for me, this type of horror. But it is, like, something, like, eventually down the line, as I read more and more horror, this is something I would like to get into.
Yeah, maybe. I found there was parts in the Southern book club's guide to slaying vampires that were really scary, and they've really stuck with me. There's a particular bit where there's like, I think it's an old woman like trying to go after our main character, and she gets like backed up into the bins and falls back into the bins and then can't scrabble to get out, and it's honestly really stuck with me. So although his stuff's really good fun, there's some like elements of horror in them that are really, really quite scary. So maybe it's the entry level you require, actually.
Maybe. Well, that sounds very fun. My next one is a book which I honestly have very little idea as to what it's about. But it's called A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo. The blurb for it is absolutely the most intensely vague blurb in the history of intensely vague blurbs. I will read it to you. It gives nothing away. It just says, Eniola is tall for his age, a boy who looks like a man. Because his father has lost his job, Eniola spends his days running errands for the local tailor, collecting newspapers, begging when he must, dreaming of a big future. Warola, I'm not pronouncing these names wrong, these names correctly, I am fully aware, so forgive me. Ayola is a golden girl, the perfect child of a wealthy family. Now an exhausted young doctor in her first year of practice, she is beloved by Kunli, the volatile son of an ascendant politician. When a local politician takes an interest in Eniola and sudden violence shatters a family party, Ayola's and Eniola's lives become intertwined. That's really it. That is the only thing. So you just know that it's about these two families whose lives become intertwined and somehow has to do with the kind of politics of Nigeria. That is all for me that I need to know because it's by Ayobami Adebayo. And I freaking loved her Women's Prize shortlisted novel, Stay With Me, which, did you read Stay With Me?
No, but I know it's kind of very popular and everywhere at the time is glowing reviews.
So good. Stay With Me is one of those books that's very twisty, and there's scenes in it that, like, I mean, it's been 6-7 years since I've read it. I don't know how long it's been, a while. And they have stayed with me. Like, I still remember them very vividly. And it's just very exciting to see such, cool literature coming out of Nigeria. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what she does next with this book, even though, like I said, that blurb really gives very little as to like what the plot of this book is.
That's quite nice though, isn't it, when you just really love an author's work, so it doesn't, they could write anything and you'd still want to read it.
Yeah, there's a few authors who are like, I would just kind of like regularly check on to see if they've got a new book coming out. She was one of them, and then the other one was Cynthia Bond, who wrote Ruby, and now I can cross her off the list. Now I'm just really tracking down Cynthia Bond.
Has Cynthia Bond done something?
She wrote Ruby. Did you not read Ruby?
Yeah, I read Ruby.
You read
I
Ruby.
thought you meant she'd like done something bad.
No, I just meant that I've been like every like few months I like check to see if Cynthia Bond has written another book.
I did read Ruby. It was one that I'd owned for a very, very long time. And I can't even remember why I picked it up in the first place. Maybe it was, I think it might have been nominated for the Women's Prize, and back in ye olden days I used to be sent the shortlist when I did
fun.
Yeah, and I just read it, and I remember thinking it was amazing. There's elements of that story that really stuck in my brain, like seared into my brain.
The scene in the woods is like the most upsetting thing I've ever read in my life.
Yes, yeah, lots of witchcraft and stuff, isn't there, in it?
Yeah. But she hasn't done anything since. I'm like, come on.
No.
We want more. It was so good.
So my third one, and talking of NetGalley, they've just approved this one for me, which I was very excited by. So they've approved the audiobook, and it is out on the 27th of April in the UK, and it's called Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater. Now, Alice Slater, I think this is her debut. When I tried to look it up, I could see that she'd edited like a short story collection together, and I hadn't realised she was actually the, is it called an editor when somebody like brings a load of people together to write a short story collection?
Yeah.
Anyway, I hadn't realised she was the editor of this short story collection. I think it's called Outsiders. And I think this is her debut, but she does a podcast with another author called Bethany Rutter. It's called What Page Are You On? Do you listen to that?
Oh, I have listened to episodes here and there, but I've not been like a faithful, loyal listener. No, but I do know who you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like them. They haven't released anything since November last year now, I think, because they are both about to release books. So I think they're busy being authory. And yeah, this is Alice's debut. So I'm going to read the blurb to you. The cover is like this lime green with pink writing on it and then blood dripping off a bookshelf. It's fantastic. A bookshop, a true crime case, a deadly friendship. Roach, bookseller, loner, and true crime obsessive, is not interested in making friends. She has all the company she needs in her serial killer books, murder podcast, and her pet snail, Bleep. I mean, the fact she has a pet snail just totally sold it to me. That is, until Laura joins the bookshop. Smelling of roses with her cute literary tote bags and beautiful poetry, she's everyone's new favourite bookseller, but beneath the shiny veneer, Roach senses a darkness within Laura, the same darkness Roach possesses. As Roach's curiosity blooms into morbid obsession, it becomes clear that she is prepared to infiltrate Laura's life at any cost. So yeah, I think it's
fun.
Presumably it falls into the like crime thriller genre, which I don't always have massive luck with. I literally just finished The Guest List, which I didn't enjoy, by, is it Lucy Foley? It's one of those genres that, oh god, this sounds awful. I just want them to be like written better.
It's actually funny.
I get that they can be fun and they can be plot heavy and they can be palate cleansers or whatever, but quite often they can just be bad.
See, this is why you need to read In the Woods.
Exactly. But
Yes.
That's what I mean. It's not that I don't like that genre.
No,
It's
exactly
just
what you
one
mean.
of those ones that I'm like, I'd enjoy this, but more if it was
And I will say,
written.
a lot of the ones that get like really popular on social media do not appeal to me at all. Like The Guest List, Lucy Foley, none of that appeals to me. So I think there is stuff that is like probably really well written, but like it's maybe not necessarily rising to the top of our attention
and I
the
just
way we
can't
would
be
like
bothered
it
to
to.
like wade through stuff to
Yeah.
try and find it. It's the same with romance. Like I do
Yes.
actually really like romance novels, but I mean the amount of crap you've got to read to find the good stuff is
Hard to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like her. I really like what she has to say on the podcast. I find her very articulate, and I'm hoping it's really good. Right, I mean, can I
Nice.
listen to it? Which I never know is whether that's the right move or not, to listen to something rather than read it. But we'll see.
Sounds interesting. I guess I can kind of combine my next two into like talk about them both, because they're both fantasy sequels to things I've really enjoyed in the past. So the first one is the sequel to The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. So The Ember Blade was the first book in a series, which I cannot remember what the name of the series was, but it was released, I think, in either 2018 or 2019. I read it and really liked it. It's a big, hulking, epic fantasy book that has like very much a travelogue narrative and an adventure narrative, and it has a lot of kind of traditional themes and tropes that you would expect to see in this type of fantasy. But it's also quite an interesting look at like colonization and oppression, because the two main characters of that book come from an empire where they've been colonized. There are invaders that have settled their land, and they live under a military occupation. And the one protagonist's family has very much like cozied up with the oppressors, and they've been able to rise in their society because of this. And the other one's family has always been on the outskirts and very resistant. They don't view the outsider's culture as superior. They don't want their art. They don't want it, blah, 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 blah. And so because of that, they've lived a much more meager existence than his family. But both of them end up getting like embroiled in the same terrible situation, and have to go on this like epic journey where they meet all these different people from all these varying backgrounds, and go on this quest to retrieve this weapon. And the book, while it has all these like very traditional themes and stuff like that and tropes, it felt very elevated for me because of the depth of characterization, and because he was not afraid to have quite unlikable characters and people who were really complex and weren't just easy to root for. And so I'm really excited to see where the sequel goes. I'm probably going to have to reread the first book to like get my memory back as to, you know, who all the characters were and stuff, because it's been a solid 3 or 4 years since I read The Ember Blade. But yeah, I'm really excited about this, and it's a big hulking epic fantasy. And I have to say, unfortunately, a lot of the new releases in the fantasy genre are not doing it for me lately, so it's nice to have a series that I feel this excited about coming out.
He wrote the Ketty J series, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He wrote the Tales of the Ketty J.
I read that. I loved those books.
I have those on my TBR, and I really want to read them.
Have you not read them?
No, I know. Isn't that a terrible oversight?
Loved them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things, and they're not very long either, so like they would be pretty fun to get through.
They are great fun. You'll absolutely fly through them once you start them.
That's what I've heard from like everybody who's talked about the Ketty J has said the exact same thing. That like the most fun books you can have. And he also wrote a trilogy. I think it was called The Braided Path. That was pretty popular.
I haven't read that one.
So yeah, I have only ever read The Ember Blade, but yeah, I'm just really excited.
Yeah, I need to try it. I don't know if Ben's read, because Ben is the one who got me into the KJ series.
Oh, really?
I feel like he read The Ember Blade and didn't quite love it as much as that series, but he'll probably be excited there's a sequel too. Chris
Whitting is another one of those authors that really has not made much of a splash in America. Like, his books I've never seen
That's
his
really
books
weird.
in our bookstores or anything. Mm-mm.
The Ketty J series is so fun, and I remember reading it thinking, how is this not like a film franchise yet? You'll read it and think, somebody needs to pick this up for TV or film. They're so good.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to having an excuse to reread The Ember Blade, because I really liked that book. And then the final one is Casiel's Servant by Jacqueline Carey. And this one is not coming out, I think, until like May or even June. I can't remember the release date on it. But Casiel's Servant, yes, we're talking about Jacqueline Carey again. It is a follow-up to the Casiel's Legacy series. So this is basically taking the events of Casiel's Dart, which is the very first book in all of this stuff, which I have talked about ad nauseum, so I'm not going to bore anybody here with it again. Courtesan spy, like Game of Thrones, lots of politics. You'll love it. This is telling that story from the perspective of the main character's bodyguard, who becomes a very important character in the series in his own right. But I'm very excited because there are points in that trilogy when they are separated for quite long periods of time, and he's doing his own thing. And because that trilogy is only told from her perspective, and it's a very tight, limited first-person perspective, you don't really know exactly what he was up to. Like, you have an idea of what he was up to, but not, like, all the nitty-gritty details. And so I'm really excited, because I'm hoping we get some answers about, like, the exact stuff he was up to during that time. So yeah, I'm just thrilled to have another Jacqueline Carey book set in this world coming out. I cannot wait. And I hope that it's full of lots of politics and sexy times. And yeah, I'm just thrilled.
I was going to say sexy times. That's what I remember from you talking about before. And the front covers are sexy.
Yes, they are. Although I don't know how they're going to... Because, like, the second trilogy in that world is told from the perspective of a man. And yet, they still did the same thing with the book covers, where it was, like, half-naked women's backs for all of them. And I always thought that was kind of... Of course they did. Yeah, I was like... I thought it was a bit like, you know... Just put a half-naked man on there. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
Come on. Get some courage.
Oh, dear. So that's all the ones I was going to talk about. I did quickly jot down some authors that are bringing out books this year that people might be interested in, just because they're quite well known. I'd written down A Spell of Good Things, but Claire Fuller is also bringing out a new book called The Memory of Animals.
It sounds so good.
Does it? I really enjoyed, oh God, which was the one that was nominated for the Women's Prize recently? Unburied Ground.
Yes.
So it's called? Yeah, and I really loved that. And then Brandon Taylor is bringing out The Late Americans.
Yeah.
And Emma Cline, who wrote The Girls quite a few years ago and hasn't brought out anything since, is bringing out a book called The Guest. So
The Guest?
Those are the three that... The Guest, yeah. I have no idea what it's about. I figured that's probably going to be one that's fairly popular and on everyone's radar when it does come out.
She wrote like a short story collection recently called like Daddy, right?
Oh, the girls, Daddy, the Guest.
Okay. Yeah. There have been rumors flying around, and I don't know where the source of these rumors come up, but I've heard them from multiple people, and yet I have scoured the internet. Scoured. Do you hear me? I mean, I have been Sherlock Holmes on this shit, and have not been able to find the source of it, that we might be getting a new Sarah Waters this year. Now, I cannot find anything to confirm this, so I don't know where people are getting that, but I have heard it from multiple people that we should be getting, but no title, nothing. So if that happens this year, I will be properly losing my mind on this podcast.
That'd be exciting.
Yeah.
I feel like she's due one.
She is absolutely due one. We've not had one since 2016.
Wow, yeah, okay.
And
So,
it wasn't one of
she's
her better ones. Sorry. You owe us
that
a
the paying
banger,
guest?
Sarah Waters. Yeah, the paying guest. Which universally most people agree was not one of her better ones.
No, I did enjoy it, but yeah, not one of the better ones. Hasn't really stuck with me, I have to say. Oh, that'd be exciting if she's got a new one out.
Oh my god, we will have to do like an emergency Sarah Waters episode if that is true. But like I said,
an episode to her.
Yeah, I don't think that it is true because, like I said, I have looked high and low for where people have gotten this idea.
Yeah, surely her publishers would be all over it.
Yeah,
saying that she's got something coming out. So
yeah,
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either. As much as I really want to believe it, it's like one of those delusional things where I'm like, no, please let me have this.
Please be true.
Oh my goodness.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys for listening to the Bookcast Club. If you want to contact us with any questions, ideas, feedback, recommendations, etc., feel free to email us at the bookcastclub@outlook.com. In addition, we are on Twitter and Instagram at Bookcast Club. If you want to, you can also leave us a voice message that we can play in the podcast. The link for that will be in the show notes. You can also sign up to our newsletter where we give you more reviews, new releases, podcast recommendations, and updates as well. And of course, we are also on Patreon.